Welcome back to Parenting in Our Community, the podcast where we talk about the real experiences of raising kids, supporting families, and building stronger communities together. Today's episode is especially timely. With conversations happening across Connecticut about homeschooling legislation, I wanted to create a space for families who are part of the homeschool community to share their experiences and perspectives. My guest today is Marissa, a homeschooling mom of three whose background is in ballet and theater. It has helped shape her love for creativity, discipline, and storytelling. Her passions include education, religion, and history, and she enjoys exploring how those subjects connect and influence the way we learn and live. When she's not teaching her children, she spends her time sewing, baking, and building furniture, really embracing hands-on projects that allow her to create something both beautiful and practical. Marissa is passionate about home education and is happy to be a voice for the local homeschool community, which is exactly why I'm grateful she's here with us today. Marissa, thank you so much for joining me. I'd love to start by asking you to tell us a little more about yourself and your family and how your homeschooling journey began. So why don't we start with a little bit about yourself and your family?
Yeah, so I was homeschooled right from the beginning, K through 12th grade. My mom began homeschooling us in 1995, right after it became legal. So she definitely got a lot of pushback with the perceptions of what homeschooling was. There was a lot of, do you think you're smart enough to educate your own children? Do you have the right resources? So I started right off the bat. I never went to school. Actually, that's not true. I went to Morgan High School for one day. I shadowed my friend when I was considering going to high school because I wanted to have access to the theater department, but it was terrible. I thought it was horrible. I was like, you guys have no freedom. You just have to go, from one room to the next. You have to sit down the whole time. There were some viewpoints that were expressed by the teachers that I found offensive, and they made fun of positions that I held openly as if everybody else believed that. So it was like, okay, well, that's going to be the circumstance, which I guess you get used to when you're in public school. You just kind of know that you aren't the standard. Especially growing up, we were very conservative, Christian. I knew that I couldn't tell people that I was conservative. It was a dirty word. That's obviously not the case for all homeschooling families in Connecticut. There is a broad spectrum of people who are homeschooling, but for my community in 1995, that was the case. So, that was my mom going through all of that. I got to see that. But as a homeschooling mom myself today, I don't really get much pushback. I do hear negative stories from my friends who say they'll say things to their friends and their family. A lot of their parents don't understand why they're homeschooling. I never really got that. And maybe it's because I was homeschooled already. So I'm kind of surrounded in that bubble. My cousins were the ones who started homeschooling. So my aunt got my mom involved. So it was kind of already in the family. There was no real pushback. My grandparents, my mom's parents were farmers. So they weren't like, Harvard educated. Why are you trying to ruin my grandkids? They were just happy that we were doing independent studies. So a little bit of a different situation. My dad builds cellos for a living. So he's self-employed. So I had a very different experience growing up with having two parents in the home all the time, which is different from now where most people have no parents in the home. Both parents are working. I remember going over to my friend's house and she was like, oh yeah, my dad goes to work in the morning and I don't see him till I get home. And I was like, that's terrible. You don't see your dad all day long? And I could just go run upstairs, which anytime I wanted to go be like, Dad, interrupting his work. Like, oh my goodness, I can't believe he got anything done with, I have 6 siblings. So there's 7 of us. So we constantly kept my parents busy. But that was kind of the landscape growing up, is we were always doing stuff, always doing projects, always going on field trips. I mean, we lived at the library. We lived at the park. We were constantly bringing our books everywhere just because who wants to be inside? And there was a lot of us before my parents expanded their house. So to me, education was self-study. It was exploring. It was going to museums. It was very much interest-based. something that I continue with my own children these days. I let them guide their own interests. I do make sure they do core work and things like that, but like math, grammar, the basics.
Right.
But for me, education is really about teaching yourself and allowing yourself to guide your own interests, because at the end of the day, as an adult, you're not being tested on all of the subjects every single day. You find your passion and then you pursue it, and then how well you can pursue that passion and figure it out on your own is how well you succeed. So in my mind, that should be mimicked in your education, which
Right.
homeschooling does very well.
Yeah. That kind of brings me to a point. So I have a senior and a junior and a freshman in college and then a young adult. And with them being in this stage of their life, the idea that they should know what they want to do for the rest of their lives, they all were or are in public school minus 1 year. And it just is one of those things where it's like, how they haven't like experienced enough, because homeschooling is it sounds very different than, let's say, public school or even a private school, right? Because you aren't able to explore as much and to understand like, what are my likes, like what are my passions. And I knew he was going back to public school. It was during the pandemic. And so he stayed home and I homeschooled him. And then our other kids went to school, which people didn't understand. Why would you make a choice for one and not the others? And I said, because they're all different and I'm meeting their needs and meeting them where they're at. I feel like what has been discussed a lot, and a lot of parents especially feel like those needs, just like making a choice like that, is harder to do in like the public school system. Because each student does have their individual needs, even like within a home, right? So imagine like in a school, in a classroom where you have all of these students that have individual needs. And again, I'm saying this with my kids have been in public school. I was raised in public schools, and not everyone is able to homeschool.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that is the option that a lot of us have, right? Is to send our kids to public school. But it just kind of opens up to like that reality that our kids, when we're raising them and when they're learning, especially when they're learning, like, yeah, let's look into what do you like? Like, what are you passionate about? And I just really admire that, because that probably really prepares them more for this stage where like my kids are at, because they haven't explored quite as much as let's say like your kids, because they've had all of these other opportunities. And it's not to say one is better than the other, but
it's definitely different in development, because I would say if you were publicly schooled and you didn't have as many exploratory experiences, I highly recommend this to all of my, probably to the the irritation of maybe some of the parents, that they take a gap year. Because I really feel like before you commit to thousands of dollars of debt of whatever your degree is going to be, you should know what you want and you should know who you are. And I think that homeschoolers can often skip the gap year, and I think often they can start college early. I mean, I did my senior year of high school was in Middlesex. I did all I needed was a half a credit. Technically, my senior year, I needed a half a credit in computer. That was all I was missing. So I did that at Middlesex, and then I graduated in December. And then because I didn't have to finish out the school year, I went and I danced in a company in New York in February. So I didn't even get to really graduate with my class in my regular ballet school because I was in New York dancing. But I think that's a great thing, because I knew where I wanted to go and I was able to get into an earlier program that had a lot of less students in it, because I was able to choose my own timing.
right.
And as far as like younger kids exploring and knowing what they want, the early childhood development years of when you'd be in preschool and kindergarten, everything that they need to learn academically is basically through osmosis. I mean, if you're present with your child and you're reading to them, they learn it naturally. They really do. You don't really even need to start book work till they're 5 or 6. And And it's just practice. It's let's sit in a chair.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hold a pencil.
Right.
It's basic work. I say this, I encourage my friends all the time with this who have younger kids and they're starting to homeschool because they get frustrated. This is a mistake a lot of parents make when they're getting into the homeschool mindset is we are not public school. We don't have to look like them. We don't have to sit in a chair for 8 hours. That doesn't make us legitimate. Until you're in, past third grade, your math, your grammar, all of that, the core work can take an hour max.
Right.
I mean, some
Mm-hmm.
days, honestly, the grammar pages, when they're focused, 5 minutes.
Right.
Really, unless they're learning a new concept.
Mm-hmm.
Once, now we're doing adverbs. Okay, that's going to be 15, 20 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you don't understand it. But it's not a routine, monotonous, every day is the same. We have moments of learning. We have deep days of change where it's like, okay, now we got to tackle this. And we do weeks of intense, okay, this is a new math concept. But then a lot of it's just maintenance. And a lot of homeschoolers do school through the summer. I did with my kids when they were younger. And what that allows you to do is essentially the next grade level for whatever book you're in, you tear the first part of it out. The first third of every book is a review. So if you do through the summer, you don't have to review. They already know it. And that is why if you ever hear of homeschoolers that they graduated high school when they're 14. It's because they do that. It's actually not that hard to get ahead a few grades when you're consistent with your schoolwork.
Right.
Even when you get behind, I'm looking at how many pages do I have left? Do I want to be doing school in June? I'm like, nah, but I'll do school in July because it's hot and who wants to go outside? So you can change your schedule depending on what you want, to do. So one of the things with going from homeschooling to public school and that is that mindset. It's really just what is expected of me. This is something that we struggle with. Connecticut has no regulations for homeschooling, essentially. In our statutes, it basically says you need to do these are the subjects that need to be covered. That's it. It just tells you the subject. It doesn't tell you what you have to do, how many hours you have to do. There's no check-ins. We love that because every parent I know, actually, this is interesting and this surprises people. The majority of homeschool moms that I know, I would say maybe 90% were public school teachers. They're all public school teachers.
Wow.
I have 2 doctors that are my friends, nurses, PhDs. They're highly educated. And most of them, they were in the school system and they saw what they could do as teachers. And they thought, well, I could do significantly better if I, now they were having kids, they were struggling, am I going to put my kid in childcare?
Right.
And they're like, well, then they saw the cost of childcare and they thought, oh my goodness, I'd rather just stay home with my kids. I'll take a little bit of a pay cut, but then I can ensure that my child is getting, a good education. And one of the things that surprised me talking to them is most of what they learn as an educator is classroom management. And wow, I didn't realize. I just started doing, we do on Fridays a co-op called Catholic Schoolhouse, and there's classrooms. So the kids are divided by their general age grade range. So I do grammar 3, which is like 8 to 10, and there's 9 kids in my class. That's not very many. You could probably tell me more. How many kids are in like your son's class? Do you know?
They probably have like anywhere from, they can have small classes, so they'll have like probably like 10 to like, but that's like the more specialized, like the special interests, and then all the way like PE classes are like,
I'm sure those are much
they're like 30, and then their core classes, I believe they have like probably like 20.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So just even having 9, my goodness. One time I literally took a decibel meter on my app and I was like, guys, we have to stay under this because it's so loud in here. Why do you have to yell?
Right.
But that like classroom management, like sit in your chair, focus on what I'm saying. That is mostly what they teach at the younger levels. My mom's a para in the school system, and she was that was the first surprise for her. She was like, it's just learning to take instruction and to do what everyone else is doing, which being a parent of a young child who every single one of my kids seem like they're allergic to chairs. They're always like dripping off of them or falling. I always fall off my chair. My dad literally put a seatbelt on my chair because I would constantly fall off of it. But I understand that. So what they learned as teachers was classroom management, creating a schedule, creating a curriculum, staying on task. How am I documenting my students? But it really didn't have as much to do with the specific like education until they got their assignment. You're in this class. So then they got their work and they're brilliant. But there's so many times where I'll talk to them about a new curriculum they're using with their own children. They're like, I didn't know any of this. So it's not that the teachers in the class know everything. They learn to what their assignment is,
Right.
which is great. That would be insane if you had to know everything.
Mm-hmm.
That would be an unreasonable expectation. But one of the things that I love about homeschooling is I get to learn everything. And I have like one of those, IKEA shelves, the Kallax that everyone has. And I have the biggest one they have, and every single cubby has a curriculum in it. And I have math and grammar and phonics, and I'm very passionate about curriculums. I will talk to absolutely anybody about the options to learn how to read and do math. So one of the things that I love about the homeschooling is that I get to learn everything and I can really diagnose my kids. Like, where are they struggling? Where are they excelling? And one of the most beautiful things that I learned as they got older is if they aren't getting something, sometimes the best thing to do is not do anything. I remember my daughter, Lucy. I had taught her to read. She understood the CVC, vowels, creating phonics, basic, but she just stumbled through reading. She hated it. And we had these little reader books. We got through the Bob books. She was okay with those. We went to the next level and it was like full on fit. And she's, I hate reading. So I stopped. I was like, my number one priority is not to get her through her grade level. It's to let her love reading because it's important.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's many things more important than loving reading. I say this here in this library today. But I did nothing. 3 months later, she picked up Dr. Seuss, Cat in the Hat, and read the entire thing cover to cover. I mean, that's not an easy book.
No.
And I was like, what? It just had to click. She had gotten to the point where she wasn't quite processing it. She hadn't developed there. It was the same thing with her speech. She wasn't talking at all. The doctor thought she was developmentally delayed. And then the next appointment, she was like, my brother has a helicopter. And she didn't stop talking. So, kids, I noticed they have milestones and they don't always go. Whereas my youngest, I mean, he was like so average in the best way possible. I couldn't believe it. I was like, he's reading when he's supposed to be reading. He's doing math. He's remembering what I taught him. Like, that was a mind blower. Because my oldest son, he's definitely just like me, very dyslexic, does not memorize well at all. So, I mean, I would teach him. He had his whole 5 years old. He had all the multiplication memorized. I went away for the summer, didn't do anything, came back, didn't remember anything, still struggles with it. And it was that rote memorization he just struggles with. So when my youngest, learned by proxy, I'm going over it again and he's shooting off the math facts. It was like, whoa, they're just so different.
Yeah.
And and you could understand that that's why when you have different children, some kid may really need to be homeschooled. And then another one, I mean, my daughter, Lucy, she'd succeed anywhere. I could put her in public school, private school. She would succeed. She loves competition. So I see how each of my kids could succeed in different environments, but I just choose to homeschool them because I think I value family time and being around them and choosing their peer groups and things like that. So, but education itself is not so straightforward as what are your grades. It's really the development of the whole child and encouraging them to go, in the direction that they find is best for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to what homeschooling actually looks like. So, Marissa, what does a typical homeschooling day look like in your home? And I know, like, how we've been talking, there may not be, like, a typical day because from what I'm hearing, a lot of it is, like, letting the kids guide how they're learning and like what is the next step. So like for example, Lucy, like you stopped with the reading for a few months and then she picked up the Dr. Seuss book, which is phenomenal because you're right, that is very hard reading. Do you have like a base of what it would look like?
Yeah. So I have several different flavors of a typical day. I would say my ideal day, my core works, like get everything done day. I try to do that on Monday because it's the beginning of the week, so I can be super productive. So as the week derails, I feel like, okay, I did a solid day on Monday. So I have the kids do math, grammar, history. We do diagramming. They do building thinking skills. So there's logic. Sometimes we'll go over in the Catholic schoolhouse, there's a bunch of different subjects and each week has a new theme. So we'll go over whatever the content for that week is. Oftentimes, whatever the theme, either in that or whatever we happen to be working on, I'll let them watch a documentary. I try to make housework a part of it.
I love that. I love it.
I struggle with this. This is not something that I do well, but doing their laundry, like picking up after themselves, trying to get them to clean things, teach them how to clean the bathroom, teach them how to sweep the floor, things like that. Now, I do not do this as often as I should, but it is a goal, and I do put it on. I make stipulations so they always want to play video games or they want to do their screens for the day. Nothing is allowed to be done unless they have cleaned their room. The kitchen looks okay, and the living room doesn't have stuff all over it. That's like my baseline, and I stick to that. But yeah, so we do all of our academic work. Most days, we have our core work. So just like the academic subjects, not the electives. And those we just get done. So we're pushing through. They're staying on top of their math. They're either reading, things like that. But we have meetups that we do with our homeschool group because that is one thing that everyone vocalizes. They're concerned about homeschoolers and we're not good at socializing. No, we're very good at socializing. I don't understand where that comes from, where people say homeschoolers don't, because the one compliment that I got growing up was that I can socialize with anyone. I could sit down when I was 12, have an adult conversation.
Right.
Because I was never with a peer group. I was always with people of differing ages. And even when we had classrooms, they were differing ages within it. It was never, the only time I felt uncomfortable, like I couldn't socialize, was when I was on a field trip and everybody was my age. That was the only time I really felt uncomfortable because I just felt more comfortable with older or younger people. Maybe that was just what I grew up with. So, but we usually get together. We meet at various locations, parks, and it's beautiful because the kids just play. They run around, they organize their own games, and then all the adults, we can talk about everything. We talk about, what's going on with our health, what's going on with our school. How are you guys doing? Oh, how's math going? Oh, it's not working. Or what curriculum did you use? And that is our support right there. So if anyone's considering homeschooling, you have to find your crew, you have to find your group, because so many of them were like, I was about to quit. I didn't want to do this until I found a group.
Right.
You really need that support system. Community is so.
The whole reason for this podcast was because I saw a need in our community for parent support. And
Absolutely.
we're always going nonstop, and we don't have time to stop and have an extra meeting, right? Like even if it's 20 minutes. And so when, as an intern, I was helping with the Elliott React group. And so we were trying to get the parents to come in, and they, like, when we did talk, like, you could tell it really made a big difference. And I was like, how can we make this happen and let parents feel heard and seen? Because I just wouldn't let it go. Like, it just was something that it was inside that kept nudging, because we need that community. Like, it's funny because I feel like everyone feels like they're more connected because of the technology, but I think in a way it actually isolates us more. And so having that community, I feel like we don't have that as much in public or private unless your kid is a part of something.
Absolutely, 100%. Because there's people that I have been very close friends with, I have not seen in several years because we just moved on from a different group. And it's not like there's no animosity.
Right.
It's just like, oh, our groups don't collide anymore. And you really are with who you are with in your group. So like I see my Catholic schoolhouse people regularly. I see my Tuesday meetup people regularly. So those are my close group. And there's many other people that I love and I would love to see regularly, but there's just not enough time because it was funny. Somebody asked if how much socializing do your kids do? And I was like, well, I could easily only socialize. Like I have so many groups.
Right.
I have a group on Monday I could go to, Tuesday, Wednesday morning, Wednesday evening, Thursday morning, Friday morning, Saturday after. Like I mean, it's endless. It's endless. So I mean, if I wanted to just give up academics, we could just socialize. We could totally burst that stereotype. But yeah, so the groups, but the community support is really essential. And in fact, I don't even remember. Maybe it was 4 years ago. I deleted Facebook. I don't have Facebook. I'm only on Instagram. I don't participate on post or anything just to see, who's had babies or gotten married. But I felt like it really, even though I lost touch in a sense with certain people, I feel closer to people because I don't like knowing about everyone if I haven't seen you face to face.
Right.
It's very weird to see somebody that you haven't seen in 3 years and already know everything about their life. I want to go, how have you been?
Right.
And then I want to give them that opportunity to say it back. But having a community that you see regularly, that you're in dialogue with is so important as a mom, especially sharing values. And that's something that I think that's one of the biggest threats to homeschooling is our values, at least my group. I can't speak for everyone. Again, there are many, many different types of homeschoolers. But the truth is, I would say probably the majority of homeschoolers are Christian parents with a biblical worldview because it does go against our societal norms. There's other more secular agendas that are being pushed in our public spaces, our public schools, our libraries. And it's not things that we necessarily want to expose our kids to or explain to them. And a lot of this is what's concerning. A lot of this is seen as a type of abuse. This abuse of restriction, that you're not allowing your kid to be exposed to other worldviews. You're indoctrinating them to your specific worldview. Well, the truth is kids are going to be indoctrinated by their surroundings, period.
Right.
And our mind is that as their parents, we should have the right to raise them as we want to raise them.
Homeschooling parents experience challenges and they have hopes for their children, just like public school parents or private school parents. So can you elaborate a little bit on what that is?
Yeah, I think there's a tension a bit in the dialogue between homeschool and publicly schooled because we do feel a lot of pressure publicly against homeschooling sometimes, a lot of support. But there is a temptation to paint ourselves as this perfect utopia. My homeschooling adventure is beautiful and messy, but it's certainly not a utopia. I think public, parents who have their kids in public school are going, is my kid learning enough? Are they on track? Are they doing their homework? Are they understanding what they're doing? We feel the same thing. Are they getting it? Are they retaining it? Are they understanding? Am I doing too much for them? Sometimes when my son gets tired, I'm writing the answers in because I just need him to know it in his brain.
Right.
Just know that the writing section is just a little hard. Am I helping too much? Am I not helping enough? So it's the same questions. It's just we have a tendency to be there. We can't blame anything on anyone else as a homeschool mom. That pressure of knowing. But then on the other end, there's a big joy because if my kid can't read, it's my fault. But if my kid reads, I taught my child to read.
Right.
And there's a joy there. Like I have the ability to teach a young human being that only learned how to talk a few years ago how to read a book. Like that's very exciting. So there's a lot of joy and reward from knowing that what your child knows was facilitated by you. But also, I think we, as homeschool moms, really get to see how much they learn on their own and how much it it's self-knowledge and being self-taught. And most homeschool curriculums are written to be self-taught. When you get into the high school levels, everything is written to you. You're reading to you. It's like the person's talking, and then you're doing your own work. You're checking your own answers. Often, there's a certain amount of honesty involved there, that you are not, just looking at the answers. You're just getting through it. And it depends on the type of work you do, because a lot of it's on the computer now, which is great. I mean, the amount of resources, that's the thing. For parents who are on the edge that, they're thinking, okay, maybe I want to homeschool. I don't think I can do it. A lot of parents are just like, I don't think I'm smart enough. There are so many resources out there. I mean, you can essentially put your child on a digital, like there's online programs. One of our good friends, she's doing everything online. All of her classes are online. She has a live teacher. It's great. And she doesn't, and her grandma is helping her, and she's doing a fantastic job. And she's like, it's so nice that I'm not the one who's just like, that has to worry about grading everything. Because, when your kids get into the teenage years, sometimes there's a little animosity.
Yeah.
And it's like, Mom, I don't want to do this. And it is nice to know that there is a teacher, that you can have, outside responsibility to. My son is doing some writing, and it's nice to have somebody who I can ask, although we're still struggling with the writing thing. Not everybody's going to be perfect at every subject. So, giving yourself some grace, giving your kids some grace. I think the scariest thing about homeschooling sometimes is as an individual, you have overcome many, many obstacles in your life. And then you're like so proud of yourself for all your coping mechanisms and all of that organization that you've been able to incorporate into your life. And then you have children, and they're just like unrefined versions of yourself. Start over.
Yes.
Start over again. And you're like, oh, I forgot I used to do that all the time, all day long. I forgot I never had a filter. So it's interesting to be parenting, little versions of yourself. But the thing is, my mom was doing math with my oldest, and she was like, I don't understand how he's coming up with these answers. And I was like, oh, it's because he's dyslexic. That 9 just turned into a 6. That's why he added it to the 4 and it became a 10 and it didn't become a 13. And she was like, how did you know that's how he was doing that? Because it was so convoluted. But I was like, that's what I used to do.
Right.
So if you're engaged and you're willing to teach your kids, you can be a resource to them it would be very unreasonable to expect a private tutor to be able to jump into your child's brain and understand it. So I think that's one of the real benefits, if you have the time. And that's the thing, is a lot of people just don't have the time. They don't have the resources, which is why when we get this pushback from the state, like with the suspicion of like everybody must go through a view, everybody has to, now they want us to file a notice to educate. So right now, if you withdraw your child, you just have to do a notice of intent. I intend to educate my child. They sign it, you're good. So they want everybody, even if your child's never been in school, to show up to the school and say, the assumption is that you will put them in school, that the state has the right to educate your child, not you, that they're not your responsibility. You're just, a facilitator of their life. And that is offensive to us, because we believe that we have a God-given right as their parents, that we should be responsible for them, that we have the right to educate them. But, not everybody has the ability and the resources to do that. So but that includes even people who are privately schooling. They want to be able to do that. So, everybody has different resources. So there's no animosity towards anyone. It's like, oh, you put your kids in public school. I want more resources for people who are in public school, because I hear like my mom, she's doing all this work, and the kids beg to be pulled out. That's what they're like. I want to pull out, because then they get to go, and she gets to privately work with them.
Right.
Whether 1 to 4 children, they love it. My mom, of course, being a 25-year homeschool mom, loves to play games. So everything's gamified. That's where I get it from. And they really enjoy that. And she's like, I can't tell you how many times I call her and I'm like, hey, the kids want to come over and do some school with you. And she's like, I got to work. There's 4 people out. They don't have enough paras. They called me, asked me. I mean, they're just constantly in need of more people and more resources.
Right.
There's a high turnover rate. And I think about all of these kids whose parents can't homeschool them. And I think that they deserve an education. I think every single one of those children deserve a one-on-one education, just like my kids get. I don't know how my kids would learn so many things if I wasn't sitting there with them patiently, because I love them, because they're my children. That's where the patience comes from. The patience comes from. So when this legislation would, in the best of circumstance, flood the administration, like all the school administration with all of this paperwork, could flood DCF with all this paperwork. There are children who are at risk who need that attention. Even the commissioner of DCF the other day, she said they have a 50% turnover rate. That's a problem. These children are at risk, and you're going to be flagging good homeschool families who are out of their own pocket educating their children. Do you know how much our town spends per child that is enrolled in our public school? $24,000 per child. That's how much they receive per enrollment. And that's why they don't want these kids not being enrolled.
Right.
So what is part of this legislation is that they are making available to homeschool families 2 classes they can take that will enroll them in the school system and allow them to get funding. And it will also create a registry so that when they change any sort of medical standard or immunization standard, that they would be under that authority. So this is what we don't like.
Right.
We don't like that you're just trying to find us and put us on a list, but I see these children that are in the school system. I don't think the school system is evil. I have parents that are wonderful, beautiful people that are currently working in the school system as teachers, as paras, and they're doing the best job that they can do.
Right.
I don't have any issues with the teachers, but it's just so hard because it's the infrastructure itself that's not serving, and adding more red tape is not going to be helping anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What do you wish people understood better about homeschooling families? And I feel like you've touched a lot about that, but I really wanted to make sure to give that specific voice because I think it's really important.
Yeah, we love our communities. That's really, we are the community pillars. We have the time. There is, you're involved in a lot of things. Anytime anything needs to be done in the community, whether public service or theater programs, costumings. I'm in the theater industry, so, I do ballet shows and my mom does costumes, and anytime anything needs to get done, it either needs funding or volunteers.
Right.
That's it. And funding is never available. There's never enough funding. And even when we get incredible fundraisers, we still need volunteers. And the volunteers are those who have time. Very often, they're going to be grandmas. That's who volunteers now, because the parents don't even have the time. It's usually the grandparents who come and help. The amount of grandparents who are raising their grandkids essentially because childcare costs are insane.
Yeah.
And in the last few shows that I've done, the only people that have helped backstage turned out all to be homeschool moms. I didn't even realize it was an accident. We were just talking and I was like, "Oh, are you homeschooled?" She's like, "Yeah, I homeschool." And I was like, "I'm homeschooled." And then I was talking to the stage manager. She's like, "Oh, yeah, I homeschool." And I was like, "Oh, we're homeschoolers." Because we're the ones that, have the time, because we've already taken out of our time to educate our kids.
Right.
So there's that, that resource. But it is kind of unfortunate in a sense that there's so much pressure, when I do a new program, I don't like to let people know right off the bat because it's like, "Oh, you can do stuff. Okay, you do this."
Right.
And then it's like a huge weight where it's like, "Oh, then there's this expectation, like you're not doing anything, right? You
Yes.
work." Because when you don't work, you don't do anything. You just sit tea,
right?
All day long at home. No, that sounds lovely with a good book. But yeah, so the one thing that I wish people would really understand, and one of the co-chair of the education committee, that Jennifer Leeper, she really cares about community involvement. You go on her page, she talks about how she's trying to pass bills to get more civic engagement with the kids. Well, what would really help civic engagement is just less, legislation from us. We're already doing it. So maybe take a book out, a leaf out of our book. That we aren't the enemy. We don't want to have to feel like we have somebody constantly looking over our shoulder, because that doesn't help. it hinders. My cousin she homeschools in New York State, and they have the highest regulation. We're currently surrounded by really high regulation states. It's pretty amazing that Connecticut has been able to stay low regulation considering the demographic that we have. But she's like, it doesn't do anything. It's just an annoyance that I have to keep track of all this stuff. And then she's like, she goes in the school system and looks at what they're doing, and she goes, oh, I'm fine. Sometimes I worry. She's got 9 kids. She's like, sometimes I worry, but no, I'm doing okay.
Right.
Then she sees their curriculum. She's like, no, I'm okay. We can do this. We're staying on track. We're, and it's funny how when you really have that goal and that freedom, and you know who you are, and you can explore what you want. Once you get out of that high school, once you graduate, I mean, my cousins, they all homeschooled too. My cousin Cody, he's got a doctorate in nursing. He just likes going to school, like professional, full time. He's got a doctorate in nursing. He's a or a massage therapist. He also has a degree in nutrition. I think he's got his master's in nutrition. I mean, he just keeps going to school, but that's what he loves.
Right.
He also, I mean, his house looks like Better Homes and Gardens. It's crazy. He's like master painter. So everybody has, and one of them owns a business, one of them's a nurse. They find their thing and they do it well. And
Right.
they do it with joy. And, that's what I wish everybody knew about homeschoolers is we just want to make our communities better.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, so like we had discussed in the opening, there is a current legislation coming up this week. It is March 11th. March 11th.
At 10 o'clock.
Okay, so since that's this upcoming Wednesday, there has been a lot of discussion around homeschooling legislation. From your perspective as a homeschooling parent, what are families concerned about?
Yeah, what we're most concerned about is having a registry of homeschoolers. I think top of the list would be, at least in my community, I'm a part of a very specific community that is very focused on medical freedoms. And I think everybody has that on their mind, especially after 2020 and all of the things that we went through as a society. But we don't want to be on some sort of list where we will not be able to have the freedom to make our own medical choices. That's probably top, at least in my own community. So just to give a bit of a history for people who aren't in it, they may not be aware if you've just gone along, if you're in the school system and you've followed all of the procedures, this may not even be on your radar. So just to explain, usually you would be, if you had a child who was at risk or for your own personal reasons or religious reasons, you could exempt from vaccination. They took away our religious exemption. So you cannot get a religious exemption now. So if you had a child who was vaccine injured, and we have several in our community, you would have to sign a religious exemption form in school, and then you wouldn't have to have the standard vaccines. They took that away. So what happened is people had to take their kids out of school. Well, that they take their kids out of school, there's no registry, so they're safe. Well, that's what this is. They want to make sure that they can keep the child on the record so that even if you're not in school, they can tell you have to stay on the standard immunization. They don't want you to be able to get out of that by withdrawing. That is a big concern. The other concern is that they want, what this bill is being introduced, HB 5468, equivalent instruction. So they want to make sure that they can mandate what is being taught in your home. Now, this sounds reasonable on the surface. Let's give it like the benefit of the doubt. We want to make sure that every student has math, grammar, history, science is being taught majors, that nobody is getting educational neglect. That sounds lovely. Very, that sounds great. But the problem is that there are other curriculums that are being introduced in the school system that we don't want our children to be a part of. Maybe things like critical race theory or DEI or gender studies, things that are being pushed on the students in sometimes a lot and sometimes not very much, but we don't want the state to tell us what we have to teach. Now, for people who aren't knowledgeable about homeschool regulations, there are several levels. Connecticut has the lowest, which is the only thing you have to do is send a letter of intent. If you are withdrawing your child from school, if your child has never been registered, they don't exist in the state. You don't have to tell anybody. You just homeschool your kids. As long as you're doing what you want, you are legally protected. The next regulation would be like you have to check in with the school system. You can do a portfolio review. Some states are really high regulation. You have to have a certain number of hours. Like my sister lived in Pennsylvania, so I looked up the laws. She had to do, I think it was like 400 or 500 hours. You have to log. So you have to prove that you've done 400 or 500 hours of instructions in a school year, which seems okay because if you look at it and you're like, oh, well, school, they do a lot more. Well, how do you calculate 400 hours? If I'm in a classroom of 20, I'm teaching one thing, it can take me an hour to teach one thing, but one-on-one, it takes 5 minutes. So I don't know how they would want that calculated. That's confusing. So this legislation would say that if your child is 5 and over, you have to go to the school system and to tell them, you can keep them out of school till 6 or 7, but you have to let the school know. And the school has to, if you want to homeschool, they have to approve it. You're asking permission. You don't have the right to choose. They tell you whether or not you're allowed to do that.
And to clarify,
do that through DCF.
And through DCF. Yeah. And to clarify for those that don't know how this works. And I know this because with my youngest, I did have to write the letter of intent because I was withdrawing him for a year and then he went back. So for those that don't know, there's no asking permission right now. No. Like it's just informing them and then that's it. And there was more information that was sent to me. I reached out to the homeschool community, like a lot of different homeschool groups, to make sure that what I did kind of like I want to say a novice, especially knowing that I was going to have him eventually go back, wouldn't hurt the homeschool community, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And so that's a really big distinction that I want people to understand. Like right now, how it is that's a huge difference. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between saying, this is what I'm doing with my child, and can I do this with my child?
Yes. Yeah. And it's something that it's hard for me to wrap my head around because I was homeschooled and I keep my kid, like I've never been in the school system. So the idea of having to ask permission to homeschool is absurd. Like it's like not even, it's almost like so far outside of what I can understand that it doesn't feel real to me.
Right.
I feel like if somebody told me that I wasn't allowed to school my kids, it would just be like, that's ridiculous. So the legislation they're proposing is a massive outreach. And then anybody once you've told them, I intend to homeschool my kids, they'll be put on a list. It's called data links. It used to be called, it's like, I don't know, some numbers and letters, like something 20, but now it's going to be renamed data links so that they will be in that database. And there was, what I testified on last Tuesday was SB 6. And in Section 5, basically it was, if you withdraw your child from school to homeschool or publicly school them, the Commissioner of Education will be notified, and then no later than 2 days later, DCF will be notified. If no negligence is found, if there's no open case on the child being withdrawn, then you're good. You're good to go. And if not, then who knows? So my concern, and the concern that a lot of parents raised, was we don't want to be put on a registry. So they did actually pass it, but they changed they didn't like officially pass it. It's like going through the process, but they changed the language so that it said, if there's no negligence found, DCF will expunge your name from the record. Great. Doesn't that sound amazing? But it didn't say anything about the education. Like they would still have your name.
Right.
And they're who we're concerned about, not just DCF. Not to mention somebody's going to have to be reviewing all these files, and DCF is already short-staffed.
Yes.
So who's being hurt in the process of having to go through all this needless paperwork? So after that, and we were all very upset about that, and then they dropped this one, we were like, what? This is way worse. Also, why did they even put that in? This is kind of like, why did they put that in if they're going to drop this same bill? It seems kind of redundant in my opinion. So this is what we're upset about. We would like everybody who is concerned about this to send in a testimony. They can do that if they go to the cga.ct.gov. It is under education. So you go to committees, education, and then submit your testimony, and it's HB 54, 68. And then you just say, I don't like this. And maybe you do love it. Maybe you want to say, I support this. But I see a lot of I oppose. So yeah, so that's how you can have your voice heard. You can give your opinion. You can submit it anonymously. And some resources, if anybody is considering homeschooling or is homeschooling and you are not a part of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, you should be, because they are the ones who are defending our constitutional right to homeschool. They're how we have managed to stay a low regulation state all of these years. They publish regularly the people that they have defended. They're a fantastic resource, especially for finding out what's legal in your area and knowing your own rights.
Right.
And if you're thinking about moving, I mean, we were for a while thinking about moving, and I was just looking at, I mean, that was my first priority. Where can I homeschool?
Right.
So that makes a huge difference. So that's a big resource.
Yeah. I'll make sure all of the resources are in the description. Also, what do you hope policymakers understand about homeschooling families?
That we are the supportive community that you need.
The next section, we're going to talk about parenting perspective. And Marissa, I just can't thank you enough for all the information, for your passion, and really for your joy of education and children and community. Like, community really, really stands out, and it's beautiful to see and witness, and we are grateful. So I just want to pivot a little bit. What has homeschooling taught you about parenting?
Parenting is really hard. Parenting the whole child is really, really hard. It has taught me patience. Well, it's taught me I need patience. I don't know if I've successfully mastered that. But it's really shown me that society stabilizes when children are allowed to find their passion and learn to communicate and see value in other people. Because if you can appreciate everyone else's talents and you know your own talent and what you're strong at and the strong suits of others, and you can grow in a diversity of thought, community where not everybody believes the same thing or has exactly, families are all different, but can find that common ground, that is where you can move forward and you can stabilize. I mean, it's really just fulfilled my parenting dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wasn't much of a change because, again, I was homeschooled. So
Right.
I already I valued it. I loved it. I had children so I could homeschool them. I mean, I like that was like all I wanted to do was homeschool. So like I have some kids to homeschool. Yeah. So parenting has just showed me that it is as beautiful as I thought. It's also messy, but it is beautiful.
Thank you. What is something homeschooling has given your family that you didn't expect?
It has given me more creative little places around my house than I could ever. It's funny. I value creativity, and so I have nurtured that in excess, and it's shown me. I didn't think there was a downside to creativity, but wow, my kids they push that boundary. Messy. I didn't expect how messy it was going to be, because growing up, I was the one creating the messes. So to me, it was like, well, the house was clean. I was the only problem. So
now it's like the other side.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is, I see now why my mom was like, please stay out of my craft cabinet. But yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's exactly what I hoped for.
That's amazing. What advice would you give any parent, whether their child is homeschooled or not?
Be present with your children. Find all of the free time you can and don't get sucked into your own interests. Even if I love education, I get sucked into my podcasts. I'm interested in building things. I get sucked into my craft projects, but I have to remember to share what you have, share your interests. When I want to build, I built something with Ramsey. I taught him how to use the power drill, and he was helping me disassemble something. When I'm painting, show them what I'm doing. When I'm baking, let them bake with me. Just incorporate your children into your life, even if they're at school most of the day. And if you're at work most of the day, try to find those times, take a breath.
Yeah.
And let them live life with you.
I love that. especially having a senior. I see the value of that even more right now. And so both the boys right now are very into photography. And so I'm so grateful for that, because we have these conversations that I never knew were even a possibility, because I never wanted to push like my passions on them. Like I wanted them to find their own. And the fact that they do have some like, it never crossed my mind to be like, hey, do you want to do this with me? Because I was too scared that it would be pushing it on them, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a narrative that like you're going to push your child into what, as if you have to fulfill your golden years and this dream that you had that you never accomplished.
Right.
And I think we do that sometimes, but I don't know if our generation does that as much. I think we need to share a little more.
Yeah.
The generation before us, maybe they did it. I don't know.
Right.
I feel like we have a problem.
Yeah.
We need to, share a little more.
And it also is like, those are those core memories that we're going to remember forever.
Absolutely.
And so I love that. I love that advice. It's beautiful. At the end of the day, what do you think all parents want for their children?
Well, I think they just want to know that they're going to be okay. Everybody has different values. Sometimes they want them to be okay mentally. They want them to be okay financially, just physically sometimes, when we're dealing with health struggles. But to know that they're going to be fine.
Right.
Healthy parents, I think, want them to be fine without them. I think sometimes we have a tendency to want them to be fine with us and incorporate us.
Right.
But, teaching them enough about what we know so that we can let them go and flourish, and in a loving way so that they want to fly back to us.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's what most parents want.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time and for being a part of this podcast, for being a part of this community. You are appreciated and you are valued.
Thank you so much.